Hello there people, I'm Nick Yakabuchi and welcome back to RealScreenReviews.com. Our next film is the animated family comedy Despicable Me, and it opened in wide release on Friday, July 9th, 2010, and brings with it the voice talents of Steve Carrell, Jason Segal, one of the funniest men alive, Russell Brand, Danny McBride, and the legendary Julie Andrews. This film comes to us from the directing team of Pierre Cotine and Chris Renaud. I really hope that I didn't just butcher those names, and they are both credited as very established personnel in the art of animated films. They have worked as art and production designers in the past, and come together to deliver the first feature for both as mainstream director. This movie opens with the public learning that one of the famous pyramids of Egypt has been stolen. This very familiar landmark has been hijacked by a notorious new and supervillain, Vector, and he promises how this will be the first dastardly act in a career of villainy that has only just begun. Now, the only individual that would ever feel slighted by this is, of course, our main character, Gru, voiced by the wonderful TV and movie star Steve Carell. Gru is a professional supervillain and absolutely by choice an all-around bad guy. He has spawned a career of stealing, thieving, and even finds it acceptable to pop a little kid's balloon from time to time. He manages to achieve these very dishonest goals with the help of his faithful and elderly sidekick inventor, Dr. Nefario, who, when he can hear you correctly, seems to invent some pretty funny and original items. Now, Gru and Dr. Nefario's next scheme is to show that they haven't lost their touch, and they want to one-up the new criminal's Vector. They have devised a plan to shrink the moon and hold it hostage, I think. I don't really know. Does it even really matter? But he first needs to get his hands on the shrink machine that is securely hidden inside Vector's lair. And the only way that he can gain access is to use 3 orphan girls that have already visited many times because they are selling, I guess, Girl Scout cookies. He goes and adopts Margot, Edith, and Agnes from Miss Hattie's school for girls. Miss Hattie is not very nice, and neither is her school, and these girls are ecstatic just to leave her presence and her home for girls. Gru then in turn does use the girls, and once he gets control of the shrink weapon, a good old-fashioned contest of who's the better villain ensues. Gru and Vector go back and forth like Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, and it is quite humorous throughout the film. It's almost as if Gru really isn't this bad guy, he's just trying to be. This point couldn't be more evident because as the story progresses, you see the feelings grow between the 3 girls and this guy that would do anything to not care about them, but he can't help that he does very much. Well people, this is just a highly entertaining film. I saw this movie on opening day in the afternoon when it was pouring outside, and those would definitely be contributing factors as to why the theater was pretty full. There were many children in attendance, and I was also there with my 2 nephews. Now I have to admit that when you hear the wholesome and honest giggling and laughter from little kids, it's almost impossible to fend off. You know, they're entertained, so you're entertained. However, I think that Despicable Me is put together well enough, and that it has such a very good message to it that adults would never even have a complaint. You can also pile on top of that a mountain of good humor and a 3D presentation that can definitely be described as eye candy. Now, I will also state that this is not as good as Toy Story 3 or another animated film from earlier this year titled How to Train Your Dragon. Despicable Me is a very solid film, and it's also very witty, but it does fall a tad bit short when comparing it to the likes of the 2 aforementioned films. What it does have is a highly likable protagonist put into a situation where he always wants to act to the contrary, but throughout the film you slowly see him come around and always seem to make the correct and unselfish decision. I would go so far as to say that Gru becomes very sincere, as does the film by the finale, and that the relationship between him and the 3 girls is the motor that drives the story. Now, I also have to mention the little yellow guys that you've probably seen on the advertisements. These are Gru's minions, or the tiny little workers that help construct and carry out all of his dastardly assignments. These little guys steal the show most of the time and are just out and out hilarious. And on a side note, they're voiced by our co-directors Pierre Cotine and Chris Renaud. I would tell everyone not to get up and run out of the theater as soon as the feature ends, because the antics of Gru's minions carries far into the rolling of the credits. At 95 minutes, Despicable Me was nothing but pure fun and entertainment, and as I've said so many times before, that's the main reasons to go to the movies in the first place. I traveled 35 miles each way to see this in 3D, and I would encourage all to see it in 3D if possible, but if you can't, I would still recommend anyone to see it regardless. With many laughs, spectacular visuals, and a great story, what else could you ask for on a rainy day in July? 3 stars out of 4, and remember people, I'm not always right, only when it comes to the movies. And thank you for your attention.